The
right?
red button will turn on.
Okay, good.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin our Children, Seniors, and Families Committee meeting. And we're going to begin with roll call, which is just really we all introduce ourselves. Go ahead, Ignacio.
Ignacio Guerrero, Director for the Department of Child Support Services.
Sandhya Hermon, Deputy Director, SSA, standing in for Bob Menacucci.
Welcome.
Morning, Rob Coelho from County Counsel's Office.
Cindy Chavez, member of the Board of Supervisors.
Dave Cortese, Board of Supervisors.
John Mills, County Executive's Office.
Great. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go right into public comment. And for public comment, that is a time to speak to something that is not on the agenda but within the purview of this committee. And I think we have two speakers on that. They'll get 3 minutes each. And we'll invite up Scott Robert Largent and Catherine Campbell. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Largent. I think the mic's probably on. Yeah, sounds good. Got a loud voice. Started bringing the binders back again. That's always a sad thing, I guess you could say. But I got to start scanning more of this stuff and putting it online. What I'm trying to discuss here today was the problems that I've had with our Domestic Violence Council. I've gotten to know some of the people that are on the council that, well, let's just start off with that. Cindy Hendrickson absolutely treated me with dignity and respect, made it so I felt welcome at these meetings, tried to answer my questions, kept coming up to me after meetings, did what I would have expected to happen at these committees that I go to. I am a customer of the county. So even though I had a DV order, I am ashamed of it. It was not a, it was still a domestic violence restraining order. Even though it was changed after 3 weeks and I had civil and peaceful contact, as weird as it sounds, I'm still a customer. This still takes rights of mine away from me that I've been fighting to get back. Now, this thing expired in January, okay? I can go over, like I said, I can go visit my ex, I can go over to her house, I can go to her, none of this stuff is still in the mix right now. But what I'm trying to get across to people is that the language in this restraining order, it's very hard for law enforcement to get it. It's basically hard for me to even understand. I mean, what do you consider civil and peaceful contact? Brief civil and peaceful contact. They make it very, very difficult. I ask one officer, he says, well, brief couple of minutes. I ask other people, they say, well, you have a child together. Brief and civil, I'm sure you're discussing your child, would probably be anywhere from a half an hour to an hour. So why is this not explained? We do this with laws in our county or ordinances. We make sure to put every damn thing in there, explaining everything, but not with this type of stuff. And what I'm really worried about, now when you have money, which I don't have very much of that right now because I take care of my grandmother for free and I'm just strapped right now. In another situation, I could go back in, I could get an attorney, I could get experts, I could do all those things like that and fight it out in court. When you can't fight it out in court, you need these orders to actually be understood, and they just don't get it. And I don't know why they don't change the language. Telling people to continually go back into court when they don't have the money to afford that or afford experts is mean. This language is it just doesn't explain it right. And we also have problems with the firearms stuff, and I know we've discussed that before. I just don't get this stuff. No one gets it. Why don't we just make it easier for people? And that's why I went to these meetings. Now, I was treated pretty bad. Other than Cindy Hendrickson and a couple other people from the DA's office, they treated me like garbage. But that's the place you should be able to go to bring these things up. Instead of bringing this information in here and constantly saying, hey, this isn't right, this isn't right. That's what that committee's designed for. And it's designed for people like me to be able to go in there and explain the problems they're having, not get retaliated against for bringing this stuff up. And that's what's happened to me, and it's also happened with Susan Bassey. She brought up problems with these committees, and now she's being prosecuted. It's mean. So thank you.
And then Jean Pennypacker will be our last speaker under this item. Welcome.
Does it just start when I start?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Catherine Campbell with California Protective Parents Association. Thank you so much for having public comment today. And I want to first and foremost thank you all, especially Supervisor Chavez. I'm sure everyone was involved, but for funding testing of rape kits. This is a national problem that we have, and there's documentaries made of it. I am evidence, and we have been ignoring children and women who are abused. And to take this step means we care. It means we've lived in a culture that dismisses abuse. We're willing to do the rape kit, but we're going to put it on a shelf and never test it for years. We have, I believe, 200 untested ones in our own county. We have people in our own county who have had DNA from child abuse cases that went untested, and they refused to test it when it was brought forward. We have people who have ignored it for years, and it's hard for someone to stand up and say we're going to do things better. And that's where we're at right now. When you did this, when you said, yes, we're going to put money towards testing rape kits, you said the victims matter. And that is huge for our county. We're leading the way. There are many counties who haven't gone where we are willing to go, and you have, and I just want to thank you, because it means that we're going to, you have the courage to stand beyond the culture, and the culture to dismiss abuse needs to end. We have, from the Lucille Packard Foundation, we have reports of how much is not substantiated in our county, when only 2 to 6% of child abuse is false allegations. In 2015, only 10% was substantiated for our county. And that, in the sample of counties that I looked at, that's even higher than some counties. So I don't think we should feel proud of that, though. 10%, that means 90%, more than 90% of children are living with abuse. And adverse childhood experiences are increasing for our children, which brings up the cost to our county. The cost is billions of dollars if you look at everyone who's abused and doesn't get the right help. So I want to thank you for making the shift to take care of our victims. And that it's a huge beginning, and I just thank you, and I hope we can continue. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And our last speaker on this item is Ms. Jean Pettypacker. Also.
Good morning, members of the committee. I didn't notice on the agenda an item that was carried over from the last month's agenda on the relocation of the rake, and I just want to keep in the forefront this item because time's running out. We're in 6 months to the end of the year, and we have no place for these kids in January. We heard that there's another location being considered, and we just want to make sure that we have a coalition of stakeholders that are really supportive of having co-location with the medical clinic as well as with behavioral health, and also that the site is adequate. So we are just troubled that the new location that's being considered is not adjacent to these services, but will be miles away. So we just want to encourage a fast resolution to this issue so that we have some place to put the kids in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. And that ends our public comment. Let me thank all the public speakers and also just specifically on the rake. I don't know when that will be coming back to our agenda, but my presumption is that would be August. So I'll just ask Betty to follow up and make sure that's going to be on the agenda. To move on, we're going to go to our consent agenda, and that includes items 9, 10, and 11, which are our meeting minutes. And I don't know if you want to add anything else to consent, or if you want to just leave those 3 items, and if so, we can just get a motion for consent. Okay.
I'll move those 3 items.
Thank you, and I'll second that. And that is unanimous. We'll move now to item 4, and this was held from May 9th, and this is to receive a report from the Probation Department relating to Pure Court. And I'm going to ask that if we can, to make sure that today's presentations are between 5 and 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for board for the committee's discussion. And if you could each introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Mariel Caballero, Deputy Director of the Probation Department. My name is Charmaine Moran, and I'm the Program Manager for the Neighborhood Safety Unit.
And Lincoln Law School of San Jose, I'm Laura Palazzolo, the Dean.
Great.
We do not have a formal report today. You have the report in front of you, or presentation, excuse me. We're ready to take any questions you may have or hear any comments.
I'd like you to walk us through the report for the 10 minutes that the chair allocated, if you don't mind, so we can listen and hear the statements that you're making here through the report, if that's okay with the chair.
Absolutely. This is
You
an
have
important one.
various categories in your report: education partnerships, probation officer supervision, peer court youth volunteers, program capacity. If you could walk us through those and
Maybe just
sort
the
of-
highlights under each category would be great. Thank you.
So we received a series of questions from Supervisor Cortez's office, and this report is our effort to respond to those questions. Under referral rates, there was a question about why calendar year 2016 was particularly low, and as is iterated in the report, 2016 was a low year for referrals to the probation department in general. And that is also reflected in the peer court referrals. 20 calendar or school years 2016-17 and 17-18 have increased significantly, and we think that that is a combination of general referrals going up and then also of outreach efforts on behalf of the peer court staff. So we now, in the 2017-18 year, I believe we had 20 youth who were engaged in the program. There were a variety of reasons why peer court referrals and general referrals have fluctuated over the last couple of years. The primary one was a San Jose Police Department policy change that allowed schools to institute a no citation policy on many of the high school districts. It originated with the 95122 project with the DA's office and was taken citywide in the city of San Jose to the high schools in March of 2017. There was also changes to state law, including Prop 64, the Control, Regulate, and Tax Adult Use of Marijuana Act, which legalized the responsible use of marijuana by adults 21 and over, but also changed some of the misdemeanor marijuana offenses. The Prop 47 also had reclassified many theft and drug possession offenses from felonies to misdemeanors. And then many schools in Santa Clara County have been utilizing school-based approaches to support youth, such as schooling services, positive behavior intervention supports, and restorative justice programs. So we think all of these things, which are actually many positive things, have had an impact on peer court referrals in general. Related to eligibility, due to the changes discussed above, the program moved to a school-based eligibility, and we are now reviewing that school-based eligibility and looking at whether or not we should move the program back to prevention early intervention and actually use it for youth who have been officially cited by law enforcement. We're discussing that internally within the department, and we're happy to report back in a couple of months on that information. Related to probation officer and formal supervision, it's not appropriate for the current population of peer court youth because these youth have not been formally referred to the department and haven't been cited by law enforcement. The probation department uses POIS judiciously and does not want to put youth in contact with probation officers unnecessarily. Education partnerships. We have been working quite effectively with education, and I'll let Charmaine talk about that.
Sure. So as we transitioned the peer court program from accepting education-based referrals, we've been working to establish relationships with local school districts and local schools. Because those school districts and schools vary in terms of their expulsion and suspension strategies and policies, it's been a learning curve for our staff to really understand how to integrate the peer court intervention service into the school-based model. And so for the first year during 2016-2017 school year, we were learning that process, and that was conversations that happened between our staff, myself, and some district administrators as well as some principals. So that also contributed to the low number of referrals during that school year. I believe in 2017, this past school year, 2017-2018, has resulted in increased referrals because we've been able to better understand how to fully integrate the peer court methodology into certain schools. So some schools are more open to peer court and some schools don't respond to our requests. And so there's also an issue of outreach and staffing capacity to do outreach to those schools. But we have seen that those who do participate from schools, anecdotally, the qualitative information we get, meaning the commentary from volunteers and school officials, is that they think that it is a program that can benefit their students.
Related to program capacity and strategic initiatives to improve peer court, we are going to be leveraging existing contracts that serve the prevention early intervention youth. So those contracts include mentoring programs with Connection to Community, legal education with FLY, and a community service learning program with Catholic Charities, all of which will start in July. And we'll be determining the case management. Probation community worker will be determining the appropriateness of the referrals, but we've already started conversations with all of those community-based organizations to ensure that they have capacity and are willing to accept these youth. So we're excited about increasing programmatic options for youth who are engaged in peer court. Related to volunteers, Charmaine, if you want to take that.
Sure, and I can maybe, if Laura, you would like to comment on this section as well. But what we did learn is that we didn't know a lot about the volunteers in peer court. And so beginning 2016, 2017, when I absorbed the program, we started to collect basic demographic information about youth volunteers. What schools do they come from? How many times do they volunteer? How consistent is their commitment to peer court? And so you can see in this section, we tried to give you a broad overview of the demographics of those youth volunteers. Most of them, 60%, are of Asian American ethnicity, and then more than 54% are female. So we are collecting demographic information. We are not at this time, as outlined in the report, collecting learning outcomes for youth volunteers. And that is a sort of perhaps a consequence of not having established learning expectations for the peer court volunteers through peer court. So it's certainly something we are working with Lincoln Law School to establish a curriculum so that we know, and we clearly explain what learning expectations there are as youth participate in this program. And we're looking forward to continuing that dialogue with Lincoln Law School through our advisory committee meetings.
Right, and just a few minutes from Lincoln, I think last time we were here, we saw a number of the youth volunteers give their comments and talk about what they're getting out of the program. And we have a couple of our Lincoln volunteers as well who spoke at the last meeting about their experiences. I think it's definitely a great program for our students who have the opportunity to appear in front of a real judge and to give the youth a vision of really people who look like them and come from their backgrounds can become lawyers, and this is how you get there, and this is what the process looks like. So we've had some very productive conversations over the last few months and the last couple of weeks about how we sort of took on this peer court program as a great idea, but without a framework. And so our job now is to get that framework put together. We've had various curriculums, and that's changed over time as probation's priorities and directives have changed. And I think now we're coming to a place where everybody can be in agreement as to those directives, and we can really start putting that framework in and that curriculum and a set of expectations and get to a point where we have clear outcomes that we're looking for as well, and that people are seeing those outcomes and being able to assess them. So this is an exciting time for peer court, and we're happy to have you support us in those directives.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So a few questions that I have that just, some are areas I don't understand, that just statements that seem to be in conflict with each other, and some are just general inquiries. So let me just go through them a little bit at a time. Do we, going back to the various reasons that you listed for the fall off in enrollment at peer court to 9 at one point annually, you mentioned marijuana possession as a change in enforcement on that as one of the issues. On packet page 5, it says unlawfully selling a controlled substances makes you ineligible for pure court at all. I'm not sure who wrote that law or how that's consistent with state law at this point, but are you saying that simple possession cases or use of marijuana use stopped being referred to pure court? I don't understand.
They're generally not being referred to the department at all, unless the youth is already a ward of the court. Most of the time, we have seen a significant drop-off in referrals for marijuana use to the department in general. And what we have heard from our school district partners is that they're often handling possession cases on a school campus internally through the school. So it is something we can look at. Sales is definitely not eligible for pure court because that would still be considered a felony offense in some cases. And so we were trying to give you the overall picture of why referrals in general in 2016 had declined to the department, and then also how that impacted pure court.
So this is where I'm confused, because I'm understanding that one of the other reasons perhaps that we went down to 9, but certainly the MO or the business model now is it's not about booking, it's not about somebody committing a felony or a misdemeanor, it's about a referral from a school district. So I'm not understanding how to reconcile, well, the school districts, are handling substance issues themselves. They've got to be handling them through suspension or expulsion or some other, or a restorative justice circle. That's the only 3 options that I know of. Why isn't pure court one of the options if we're not dealing with booking in the first place?
It's something we can look into and discuss with the school districts. Our conversations with them have been that they actually handle it through treatment services, so they refer to treatment services, and they're actually, youth are being engaged in either with on-campus with SUTs or community-based organizations to get treatment.
Okay, it would be good to look into that. That's a nice segue into my next question in terms of, I guess what I would call wraparound services or just treatment services coming from the county itself. I know this came up, when I read the report last time, we kicked the report over to this meeting, but in reading it, there was a discussion, and I know it's repeated in these documents today, about the fact that pure court clients are not eligible for probation referred services because they don't have a booking number. Where is that written? Is that a matter of state law? Is that a Board of Supervisors policy that we can change? I'm trying to understand, who made that rule up. If it was us, it's helpful to know that, because then we can talk about changing something like that.
I'd have to look into that. I think it's been a practice more than a policy, and we could look into that.
Yeah, it seems to me that the board, is funding through the general fund, through general fund contracts, through procurement contracts, through the probation budget itself, the services that we're talking about here. So my default in my own reasoning is, if it's our purse strings up here that dictate, where money goes or where it doesn't go in this case, I'd like to know that, in no uncertain terms, because I don't think that's a good policy. No offense to whoever, if it is coming from probation, why we would draw a line, a clear, bright line, on whether or not someone has a booking number, whether or not somebody receives resources based on whether they have a booking number or not, when we're in fact trying to keep people from having booking numbers. Maybe it's an old rule that needs to be updated to current thinking. But if you could let us know,
Sure.
I'll just kind of let you keep track of my questions here for additional follow-up.
Charmaine is writing them down as well, and we'll review the video. To address one point, so we are opening up services, mentoring, community service learning and legal education services to peer court, because those are programs that are paid through the Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act and were designed for low-level offenders, which peer court youth would generally fall into the same category. So there's no risk of mixing populations with youth who are being served in those programs. So those services will be available as of July 1.
Yeah, again, when I say current philosophy, it just seems like whether it's probation department itself or the county as a whole, certainly the Board of Supervisors is trying to push services upstream so that we're catching prospective offenders, to put it in justice terms, or prospective clients in non-justice terms as early as possible with resources so that we're keeping them out of the system. I think that's where the word diversion comes from in the first place. So not, to let the booking number get in the way of all that is my only concern here. Whether it's this particular program, peer court, or some other diversion program that's catching kids early on pre-booking, and I'm sure there's a lot of that going on through School Link services and through the resources that the schools are trying to use themselves. I think we need to figure out where we want to be, on the timeline. Thank you for answering that. Is there some reason that peer court has to be either or? Meaning, have you gone to this model of school referrals pre-booking or absent booking, basically in some cases, I guess, absent even a citation if they're just referred directly by the expulsion process. And then I heard you say in the presentation that, you're at least revisiting that to determine, in terms of the enrollment numbers, if you will, the client numbers. I heard you say something to the effect of, maybe we need to go back and look at whether or not we should go back to the way it was. Why can't it be both? And I'm not talking about necessarily on a particular peer court day, mixing clientele, with the same jury and the same judge and the same volunteers, but over the course of a year, why can't the peer court? We know in the past it's handled both levels of clientele. Why can't it do that just over the course of a year?
I apologize for the confusion. I wasn't suggesting an either or. I was just suggesting a way that we could increase referrals. So we could definitely look at serving both populations if the school districts want us to continue serving school-based youth.
Okay, great. And then in terms of the school numbers itself, do we know what the number of expulsions are in the county as we sit here today? I know that number's available somewhere, but I'm trying to get in real terms some perspective on, let me back up a little bit. I know we have 450,000 kids in the county, and if we don't count 0 to 5, some lesser number are in school at some level, and then some lesser number are in high school, and I don't remember the exact number, but I'm going to suggest that, just San Jose Unified and Eastside Union alone are probably in excess of 60,000 kids. So I'm trying to figure out of 60,000 kids, what are the numbers that are going through, that are eligible for restorative justice programs in those schools through suspension, expulsion, or other activities, School Link's services. Do we know those numbers?
Not at the moment. We can definitely find those for you and provide them to your office. As you stated, they are publicly available on the California Department of Education website. However, I do want to point out that the currently expulsion area offenses are not eligible for peer court.
And why?
Yeah, that agreement was made during the 2016-2017 school year transition. The reason why I think is because we initially partnered with Eastside Union High School District to pilot this school-based model, and at the time when the probation department was in conversation with Eastside Union High School District, the consensus was that they were only willing to refer youth who were who qualified under the non-expulsionary provisions. That was a decision that was made, I think, mutually. I wasn't involved in those conversations, but I believe that it was a mutual decision between the school district and the probation department at the time to pilot the program as a school-based model. Since we didn't really know how it was going to work, we didn't want to bring in youth who we weren't able to serve adequately, who had higher needs, because at the time we didn't have the ability to refer into services. So I think that probably played into that conversation.
Yeah, I suppose in retrospect, going back to the year where we only had 9, it would have, you know, and I know hindsight is 20/20, and I'm not trying to, you know, to judge in that sense, but it might have made more sense to use that year to learn and integrate with the school districts while we were still dealing with kids that were in the probation system, and then using a full year to facilitate a transition like this. Because I'm hearing we changed, and I appreciate the candor and I appreciate the explanation, because it's a really good explanation. We changed, and now we're working hard to integrate, the school-based model sort of after the fact. We're learning. I think you said that. I appreciate that. I'm learning too every day, including right now. So I appreciate all that, and so I am just making an observation. There's a category that I want to make sure is being explored with Eastside Union, San Jose Unified, and any other high school districts that we're dealing with, or districts that have high school age students, and that is this is kind of confusing. I'm sure you've heard the term, but it's what districts call suspended expulsions. So oftentimes what those districts will do is a student that is brought in for an expulsion hearing has their hearing, agrees to, has already perhaps agreed to a restorative justice solution or some placement somewhere. And the school district then will, the school board has the option of saying we're suspending the expulsion. In other words, we're lifting the expulsion for purposes of giving you an opportunity to make amends in a broad sense of the term. Obviously with specific requirements, and it means that if those requirements aren't kept, the expulsion comes back. The expulsion hearing can be resurrected. That's why they call it suspending the expulsion. But it keeps the expulsion from appearing ever on the record. It eliminates zero tolerance, application of state zero tolerance laws, because all of a sudden now the school board has used its discretion to lift the expulsion. And to just put it in abeyance while this other work is going on. It seems to me that in that area, this program and other restorative justice efforts that all of you are doing in social services and everyone else is doing here at the county, have a lot of fertile ground. And that's, I understand what you're saying, that the school district evidently hasn't offered that course, or maybe when they said we don't want to refer expulsions, they were assuming that wouldn't count suspended expulsions because they're not expulsions any longer, right? So I think that's just an area that should be cleared up with them. I'm a little more familiar with Eastside Union, having served there for a number of years in the past and having helped create some of those policies. Not so much with San Jose Unified, but I'm fairly certain that they're using those tools because it's one of the ways for them to avoid codified punitive measures that come under state zero tolerance laws, for example. So if we can keep that one on the list to check into, I'd appreciate it. I appreciate very much, and I don't want to harp on this at all, so I won't. I just made note to self, do not harp. But on the mentoring, I'm very excited that sounds like next month you may be instituting some more or institutionalizing relationships with Conexion, with Fly. I don't know who else is out there. I know with the high school kids, I've never been involved with it other than as an observer, but the Kiwanis Turnaround Project is in essence a mentoring program. So maybe to put that one in the parking lot for now as this continues to go forward. I'm going to say this as an observation. I think the numbers were 5 out of 9 or 4 out of 9 referrals historically I'm not talking about the year when we had 9, as you know, but historically we've had 9 mentoring referrals, and about half were considered to be unsuccessful. That is obviously a small sample, so it's probably not worth spending too much time on. But those programs that you're looking at, institutionalizing relationships with around peer court, their numbers are in the 90% range. And so I want you to know why I'm continuing to, at least as one member of the committee and a board member here, to continue to emphasize and encourage that direction that you're going to believe that those mentoring efforts will be successful. It is for, they have evidence-based, obviously, they're evidence-based programs. So I'm going to speak in a non-evidence-based way, in an anecdotal way, and just say that generally the issues, both from a criminal standpoint and a non-criminal standpoint, that those programs are dealing with on a per capita basis are generally speaking, at least as severe as, you know, the current clientele that we're seeing in the report here, these low-level offenders at peer court. So I don't think one of the reasons that there would be a failure with mentoring is that these kids, these peer court kids, have issues that are not workable, you know, through a mentoring process. Quite the contrary, I actually think, and I think we know that through other experiences, again, in probation, and those kids who are eligible for wraparound services and so forth, that that the mentoring, these mentoring agencies are quite used to dealing with relatively severe cases of challenge and issue with these young people. So, and their evidence-based numbers, at least in the most recent reports I've seen, you know, are in the low 90% range. So we should really be getting, all things being equal, you know, a 9 out of 10 success rate is what I'm saying with mentoring. Is it the end-all be-all solution? No, obviously it's got to come with a lot of other tools, and again, I think we all know that. But I want to encourage it, and I appreciate the fact that you've all decided to move in that direction. That's all I have for now. Chair Chavez, I would like to. Let me just put a footnote on one last thing. On package page 7, there's a big discussion about how we're not able to use peer court for middle school youth because it's not considered appropriate. And one of the reasons that was cited was, you know, youth can't comprehend Miranda rights during arrest. Again, I don't want to harp, but if we're talking about non-booked kids, there shouldn't be Miranda rights being read to them in the first place. And so again, there was just a little mixed messages here in the report. If we go back, certainly if we were to go back to a model that was primarily booked, you know, kids with booking numbers coming out of probation, and then the question becomes a much larger question: why do we have enough middle school kids being booked in the first place, which is a whole other policy, right? And you're doing a great job on that. So I just wanted to point out here, I don't know that we should entirely write off restorative justice opportunities like peer court for middle school kids, so long as those are really school-based referrals. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't disagree with you that they shouldn't be kids. We should be trying to avoid reading Miranda rights to kids and then having them feel like they're having to come in front of attorneys that they may not understand what's going on in that process. But I'm not sure it's as big of a problem as is pointed out here on package page 7. I know that the committee is going to be doing work, is continuing to be do work in terms of trying to make recommendations to fortify the program, and all the things that you point out, including the mentoring, which are going to start taking effect. You mentioned coming back in a couple of months. I'm eager to hear how things are going in a couple of months. Is a couple of months September? Is that a good time to hear back on progress on these various areas that, not just my questions, but the various areas that you laid out in your presentation that you're intending to work on?
Given that we'll only be about a month into school in September, I think we would prefer to come back in October or November so that we have a little bit of time to see how things are going, because we only get a few 2-4 referrals a month, and so we want to see how we're making that effort to connect youth to services, how they're engaging in services, et cetera. We may not have much to report other than our conversations with school districts if we come back in September, just to be candid.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So I asked the question. I want to hear what you had to say about it. October?
No, November, October, which is your preference?
I would say I'm going to assume. Why don't we through the chair ask for the report to come back in October? I mean, if there's some compelling reason that you're seeing at that point that you'd like to wait another month, I'm sure letting the chair know that you've got some evidence-based data that's a week away, or you got something you're trying to wrap up in terms of the report that's going to be compelling for us to hear. Just let us know. But I think putting the placeholder out there as October right now would be great, and let us know how we can help at the Board of Supervisors level. The question I asked, if I may,
yes,
the questions I asked about both the funding issue with or without the booking number, if we can get that information off agenda ASAP, that would be really helpful, because that can simply be an issue of getting a referral before the Board of Supervisors iteratively, just to clear any obstacle there. Okay. And, I mean, if there's anything else in those questions that you feel you can get back early, publicly, but off agenda, with an off agenda memo, I'm all for that. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for this good work. We're going to move on to item 5, and I'm going to ask the staff just to come forward on this issue, and I wanted to just acknowledge some of the improved services that we're seeing. And really what I want to ask is if there's something that you would like to highlight for the board, that would be great.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dan Little, the Assistant Director at DFCS.
Jackie Howe, Program Manager at DFCS.
So I'll jump to, I think, a couple items really just to highlight. This month, the Spark Clinic began offering full dental services to all youth within the community. So we really want to make that location user-friendly and be able to address multiple health needs. So when we're looking at timely medical and dental, having that all in one location, I think is going to be just a benefit for both caregivers as well as youth. I think the second component that I'm excited about is in collaboration with public health and with the Spark, we've been able to locate some funding within SSA to pilot childcare at that downtown clinic starting in August, to allow caregivers to drop off youth 12 and under at the childcare while their other youth in the care obtain medical and dental. So again, that's been reported. Childcare has been historically reported as a barrier to obtaining timely services. So I think by offering that at that site, we're hoping will help benefit the outcomes for those youth. Another thing is in partnership with Public Health, Firth 5, and County Council, we have collaborated to put a standing order together to expedite referral process for children in out-of-home care to the home visitation program. So again, looking at how we can remove systemic barriers to timely access to services. I think as far as things I would like to highlight, that really covers it. If there's any additional questions based on the report, we'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. So I do have a couple. So first of all, I wanted to say I really appreciate that we're moving in the right direction, and I think in particular, the putting services at the Spark Clinic is just really important. There are a couple of areas that were still outstanding, ideas that were being pursued, and here's the request that I want to make, is that I know we're taking a look at how we work with our partners on addressing things like how do we get multiple kids to be able to get appointments on the same day so that it's easier for foster parents or social workers to be able to take children, making sure we have childcare available during exams. And then this issue around how many people do or don't accept Medi-Cal has made me wonder whether or not it makes sense for us to come to agreements with some private dentists that allow us to, frankly, just pay cash where we need to get these services rendered. And I'm not suggesting we do this versus Medi-Cal. I'm suggesting that if we understand that Medi-Cal is a problem and there is any room with any of our medical partners that may create the opportunity for us to get our kids in front of these lines and make sure that we're attending to them while we're working on these other problems, I think we might have to have a two-pronged strategy. And I also don't know, and I'm interested in better understanding this, is whether or not the products we offer in Valley Health Plan could, if either of the other health plans that we work with, Valley or the Family Health Plan, if there's a way we can structure those plans to include a different way of investing in dentistry that is not Medi-Cal. Because I do understand that for some of these folks, they would rather not have insurance. They're going away with it. And so I think we need to respond to what's in the marketplace. What that I think concretely means is understanding how much room is there in the private sector to actually take our kids. What would it cost for us to just get them in there and again, try to deal with these issues concurrently. If it's okay with Dave, what I'd like to do is leave this on as a 3-month sort of check-in. Just because I think it's really critical, I can't say how much I appreciate the amount of work that's been done to get us moving so much further. I do feel like there's just a couple of areas that we may have to be a little more aggressive and creative and a little outside of our comfort zone in terms of how we do things. And so I'd like those examined, the 4 that I just outlined, and then to have a check-in back with us. And I don't know, maybe in October would be good. Does that give you enough time to take a look at these ideas?
I should think at least to do a preliminary inquiry.
Great. And then the other question I have, just this can be an off-agenda report. I do want to understand by October, maybe you can just tell us in October, if there are still staffing challenges based on whatever new strategies we're using. If we do need additional staff, I just want to understand who, what, and why that will help us get this problem resolved. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thanks. All right, Dave, did you have anything on this?
No, I'm happy to concur with that. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you. All right, we're going to move on then to item 6, and this is the Office of Immigrant Relations Annual Report.
Good morning, board members and committee members. I'm Maria Love, Director for the Office of Immigrant Relations. So I am prepared to either provide you with a brief summary or some highlights from our reports, or I can just answer any questions that you may have.
What is your preference, Dave? Okay. I don't think we have any questions. I just wanted to say one thing that I really appreciated was the detail in the report, particularly in terms of being able to quantify the work that was being done by folks. And I know that has been a struggle because I know the nonprofits have been really unhappy about the amount of quantification that we're asking for, but I think it's entirely necessary. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Great.
All right, so we'll move on. Thanks, Maria. We've received that report, and we're going to go to the Social Services Agency Director verbal report, and then Ignacio, yours. Did you have a report you'd like to
I
give?
do, yes, thank you. The main sort of update is about the budget. It got updated late last week, and there's some good news in that there appears to be some more money for us, some more allocations. And I think as the legislature sort of wraps up, we'll know more in terms of where we land. And we're monitoring all of this closely. That's it.
That's great. Ignacio?
Thank you very much. I do have 2 items that I want to report out on briefly. One is I previously mentioned to the committee that the state director for the California Department of Child Support Services, that position was vacant. It's been recently filled. We received notification this week that the director from Riverside County, DCSS, will be becoming the new California Department of Child Support Services state director, which I believe is a good thing. David Kilgore serves on the CSDA executive board with me, is actually vice president of the Child Support Directors Association. So I believe him coming into that statewide role will do a lot to help push and advocate on behalf of the county. So that's a good thing. The second thing I wanted to mention briefly is in my prior report out at our last meeting, I talked about a funding ask that was going to the legislature on behalf of 14 counties from California, historically underfunded counties in the child support program. And there was a funding ask that was asking for upwards of $60 to $70 million for the California program over the next 3 years. Unfortunately, that proposal was amended before it made it to the governor's desk, and it was significantly reduced to a $3 million approval of additional funding for the program. And so right now, the Child Support Directors Association, of which, like I mentioned, I'm on the board, and the State Department of Child Support Services are working to determine how to allocate that to the appropriate counties. Santa Clara County is not slated to receive any of that funding, but the reason it's of interest to us is that in the future, if our department is in line to receive additional funding, the process that's established now on how that's going to work will obviously impact us down the road. So with that, that concludes my report, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. We have one public speaker on this item, and that's Catherine Campbell.
Hi, thank you. Catherine Campbell. I just wanted to bring to your attention that something that doesn't seem appropriate within your department is that we have a system that's set up, say if there's a change in custody and the child support will be ending on a date of either 18 or graduation. And say if it's graduation and they turn 18 earlier than graduation, and that custody changes to 100% to another parent, because of your time schedule to see cases, your department was not willing to see a family through those months with 100% custody prior to graduation. Because they said it will age out by the time this will end, by the time we would be able to see you. And they were not willing to see that family and then give arrears for that period, which seems completely inappropriate. And I just wanted to bring that attention, and I think it's something that should change within the department. And there's one more minute, and I failed to mention earlier that Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio did yesterday introduce HR 113, which is for child safety. It's called Peaky's Resolution, and it's to bring child safety to our state. So I would suggest everyone look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And our meeting is adjourned until August 8th, Wednesday, August 8th. Thank you, everybody.